Alright guys, welcome back. So last lesson we worked on and introduced our graphite pencils, right? And I gave you guys 3 different types of graphite pencils, your HB, your 4B, and your 2H. We worked on this worksheet here to kind of practice with each pencil, getting used to how dark or light each pencil would get, kind of the things you needed to do to successfully blend them, and then of course we practice using our blending materials along with our kneaded eraser and try to kind of master the blending skill with the use of graphite pencils. So if you are done with this, go ahead and please send it to me through Microsoft Teams in our personal channel. If you have not completed this worksheet yet, go back to the previous lesson and go ahead and do this first before you continue. But for today, we are going to continue putting our practicing in motion, and we are going to go ahead and work with an image and kind of practicing using our pencils to create said image. Now, in terms of just the skill in general, for the most part, remember, we have learned a lot of these different skills through the use of color pencils, so in theory we should have a good grasped understanding of what we're doing. The exercises that we're working on now are just so we can acclimate to graphite pencils so that when we start our project we have a full understanding of how these guys work, how they react to one another, and then what your blending materials and the magic that those guys can create. So in your art book, and of course, as you can imagine, these are the things that you're going to need. If you do not have these things, of course, come let me know and we will figure it out. But in your art book, you're going to go ahead and turn to the classwork section, and you're going to thumb through to the page where you have the apple and the skull. So these 2 images are value heavy, right? They have a very good range from the darkest dark and the lightest light. And again, both are going to be equally as challenging, maybe the skull just a little bit more so. So if you are feeling very confident with your pencil skills, I encourage you to work on the skull. But if you're still kind of unsure or you just really want to kind of take it easy, then the apple is probably going to be the better choice. So here, to make your life easy, I want you guys to go ahead and take out this printout of the apple and the skull, just again to make your life easier. And then you should have an extra piece of drawing paper. So remember, when we did all of our color pencil lessons, we did them on nice drawing paper. And so you should have an extra piece. And if you don't, again, just let me know. I have a ton cut out and ready for you to go. But go ahead and pull that drawing piece of paper out as well. Usually when you're working inside of your book, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of work with because, of course, like the pages are all elevated and really kind of high, and you have this kind of in the way. And so when we're doing fine detail work like working with this, you just want to pull it out of your book so your life is just a lot easier. So once those are pulled out, you're just going to set them aside, and we're going to work with these 2 images here. Again, these 2 pieces of paper. So to start, remember, the skill is about learning how to blend and the use of the graphite pencils, not necessarily the skill of drawing. Drawing, as you can imagine, is a lifetime skill that you practice literally forever. I myself am still practicing and kind of working on my skills, which, you know, they could take a lifetime to gain. For some people, they're naturally blessed with that particular talent. So again, remember today that our focus is blending, not necessarily drawing. So we are going to go ahead and put this piece of paper over the work, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to trace it. Now, it's a little hard to see here in the camera, but you should be able to get the gist and the general outline of each image. If you are having a difficult time seeing the image, then of course you are more than welcome to use any material or any source that you have to trace. Now, everybody should have access to a window, and I'm going to insert a picture right here. And when you place your image up against the window, the light will reflect through and you will be able to see your image crystal clear. So again, if you're able to trace just right here on the table, then that is great. If not, then again, go ahead and take your page up to the window and go ahead and start tracing. So when you're tracing, I'm just going to trace the apple. Your main focus is just going to be on the general outline of the image. You're going to want to, again, not focus too much on the details in the center. So if you're doing the skull, you might want to focus maybe on the teeth, the nose, the eyes, and then just the general outline of the skull. And again, this is just going to kind of give us an indication on where things need to go. All traced out. And again, you're just looking to trace the shape and any fine details in the center that you might need to reference. For the apple, there isn't really anything in the center. The one thing that you could trace out is kind of where your darker values are. Again, it's a little bit harder to see with no reflection behind, so if you are working on the window, then of course you can go ahead and just kind of sketch in where those darker values are going to be. So here I would, in essence, kind of highlight and kind of just make it indicate a line where these darker values are, maybe down over here, when I am tracing, if I could see. If you could see it at your desk, that is a beautiful thing, but here right now I'm unable to see it at my desk. And so once your outlines are traced, you have the general template of what your shape looks like. And now you're going to go ahead and take your pencils and you're going to replicate these values in this space. So here, what I want everyone to do is, one, I want you to slow down, take your time, and I want you to start first observing where each value is and where it belongs. So remember, as we identified values, right, we used a scale going from 0 to 100, 0 being your lightest or white values and 100 being your darkest values. And so as you're looking at this apple, you can kind of start observing and identifying that, like, this little value right here is going to be 0, kind of wrapping around to the top. When you kind of work your way down over here, you're kind of moving into like a 40, 50 value, and then of course it starts to segue into closer to, like, I'd say 80 or 90, if not 100 in this area. Obviously you have your highlight of white right here, which is 0. And so when you're working on this with your apple, you're going to try to, again, replicate this value to the best of your ability. So just kind of generally starting, again, what you could do, put that here, is you really just start light and you start laying down these values as you see them. So remember, with your pencil, you got to be very specific and you got to start controlling those pressures, because as you know, if you press too hard, it's going to get super dark really, really fast, and that is definitely not what we want. During this time, as you are working through with your pencil, you're going to want to start using your blending materials. You're going to want to start using multiple pencils to achieve these darker values. So this pencil, I'm starting with 2H. The general rule of thumb when using graphite, you always want to start light and then gradually go darker. Now, if you start dark and work your way backwards, it's going to be very difficult, because as you may have learned by now, that your use of the kneaded eraser is very effective when the values are lighter. When there's a lot of value, a lot of graphite on the page, you have a little bit more of a difficult time removing those values because the graphite is so heavy. So again, you want to just make sure that you start light and kind of work your way up to the darker values. So here I know that there is a nice little highlight right here, so really I'm just going to work around, not putting any graphite there, so I don't have a difficult time erasing as I go. So my main first goal is to just kind of get some graphite down onto the page, so I'm not looking at this really bright, stark white, intimidating page, and it's really going to give me a base on where to start. So if you notice my strokes, I'm not necessarily blending too much. I know I mentioned to you guys that you want to first use your pencil and do the blending with your pencil to the best of your ability first, and then go ahead and kind of use your blending material. But to start, just to get graphite down on the page, you kind of just are just going to throw it right down. So once you get that first layer down, I would go ahead, use my blending material, and kind of just start smudging all of your values around. So now I'm going to go ahead and change to the HB pencil, because again, I've kind of got down my lightest values and where I want them that I could achieve with my 2H. And now I need to go darker, because again, if I'm trying to replicate this apple, I have to now, again, my darkest value is essentially almost black, which eventually I'm going to work with my 4B pencil. But for now, again, I'm going to just kind of hop in with my HB, because always, always, always remember, you go from light to dark. So now I'm going to go ahead and use my 4B pencil, because now I have gone with my lightest values, my 2H. I went in with my HB, just kind of get some other areas darker, and now I'm going to go for my darkest values over here, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of sharpen in those details as I go. So I'll go back in with my 2H pencil and just kind of add back these sharper kind of lines and details. Because remember, when I mentioned about using your blending tool and kind of smudging your graphite around, it looks like it starts to eventually just look all kind of blobbed around. So at a point, you have to go back in and kind of just sharpen things back up with your pencil just to give it that nice fine detail. So now, I'm to a point where I've kind of got my darker values where they need to be. I have some lighter values, and I kind of blended these down over here. So I'm going to go in with my kneaded eraser. Remember, you just knead it up. Find yourself a nice, clean, softer surface. Then you need to go ahead and on the apple, in your lighter areas, you're just going to kind of just make sure that they're there and add them back. So remember, when you're doing this, you just want to kind of dab and twist, dab and twist. So dabbing and twisting is going to allow you to bring back some of those lighter values in your work. Sometimes when you get too much graphite, you're going to want to, again, just re-knead and find yourself a new clean surface and kind of just continue your dab and twist. Okay, so now I've gotten to a point where my apples look getting there. I can be spending literally hours on this just to kind of perfect and bring back all of my different highlights and whatnot. But right now I feel like I'm at a pretty good spot for us to kind of get the gist and understanding of what we need to do. Typically with my last step, remember, as I mentioned, the kneaded eraser is not meant to erase something completely, and so as I was working, a lot of my edges started to get smeared and kind of lost some of those defining lines, and so I just want to take my eraser and I want to just go over the edges and just clean it up, make sure that everything is kind of where it needs to be. Voila, that's all. So again, as always, if you need help, if you're lost, if things aren't making sense, please let me know. Remember that this skill is, it's pretty difficult. So it's all about practice. It's all about slowing down, all about observing, being very specific on what you're working on. And again, we will all get there together. So again, go ahead and give this a shot. Let me know how I can be of assistance. And other than that, good luck. Have a wonderful day.